I did not hit her. I did not. It's bullshit. I did not. Oh, hi, everyone. What's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of AGR's Pop Culture Reviews. Now, this is kind of an interesting story. I actually got exposed to Tommy Wiseau in the film The Room about 5 years ago, mostly on the internet and how everybody was talking about it. Now, this film originally debuted in 2003. And if you know anything about Tommy Wiseau, and I suspect if you've seen this movie, you kind of already know the backstory, it has gone through a very interesting life cycle, so to speak. And again, much like Tommy Wiseau, the original Room in 2003, the movie that this film is based on, is a bit of an enigma, wrapped in a riddle, wrapped in a puzzle. Nobody really knows who or what or where Tommy Wiseau is from, or even how old he is. Now, the film The Room was universally panned, and it can barely be construed as a film. It has actually been compared to the kind of Citizen Kane of horrible movies, and really an exercise in everything that you can possibly do wrong on a movie set. And at the time, critics were really justified in shitting on this film. The obvious green screens, the terrible dialogue, the reshoots, most importantly, the plot lines that absolutely went nowhere. And that's to say nothing about the original film and the voice dubbing. You see, Tommy Wiseau didn't know English that well, which lent itself to some very hilarious scenes in that movie. So The Disaster Artist can really be construed as a homage to the original film, and this is a pet project by Seth Rogen and the two Franco brothers, Dave and James. And what this film explores is the kind of backstory or behind the scenes of what it took, or what life must have been like on that set, especially working with Tommy Wiseau, which I'm sure anybody would tell you was probably one of the most interesting experiences in their life. First of all, I have to say that James Franco was fantastic in this movie. I've always said he's a really good actor. One of the most important things about this film, though, is that he's not doing a Tommy Wiseau impersonation. Actually, he gives a lot of depth to him. And one of the things that I think was truly magnificent was the fact that he didn't do a caricature, and we really get the kind of dynamics of what Tommy Wiseau was thinking while he wrote The Room, and then when he later made it into a film. All of us who are into movies and have been watching films forever, at what point have made fun of Tommy Wiseau? I mean, he's a meme on the internet. But what they did here was something really cool in that they actually humanized this character, both his sincerity and his kind of naivete towards making movies and life in general, his philosophical thoughts, but also some of the dark sides of this guy and how bad it was being on that set. One of the other great things about The Disaster Artist is that it's incredibly insightful. Now, if you're a fan of the original film, you're always going to have those lingering questions as to what the hell he was thinking when he put some of the weird shit in the movie. And here, if we are to believe this story, we see why some of those things made it into the final cut. And if you think about it, it's really kind of allegorical, and this is a biography of his life. Now, Dave Franco is also in this film, and he's the brother of James Franco, and he plays Greg in the film, the best friend of Tommy Wiseau, and also his co-star in the film. Dave Franco is brilliant in this film as well, and in many ways, he carries the film. They play off of each other so well. The chemistry is amazing, and this really rounded out the film. I have to admit, I was really impressed. Seth Rogen is also really good in this film, in a way that might surprise you, in that he really toned down his Seth Rogen-ness in this film, and it worked really well. Now, as I mentioned before, The Room originally debuted in 2003, and again, it was universally panned when it was initially released, but since then it has really developed kind of a cult following, and it kind of slid into the category of the movie is so fucking bad that it's actually really good. The other really strength of this film is that, James Franco as the director really did his homework with this film. He actually did these scenes shot by shot from the original Room in 2003, and it worked very well here. It's almost like when you were looking at those scenes, you were looking at the original film, which, you know what, props to James Franco, that was not easy to do. Now, the actual number of this film, or the budget that it took to actually produce this thing, was somewhere around $6 million, and supposedly it came from Tommy Wiseau's import-export business of leather jackets, and that could be a whole nother movie in terms of determining where the hell this guy's from and where did he get the money for this film. But it only grossed at the box office about $1,800. Now, I'm just gonna be honest with you guys, the original Room was a shit film, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't entertaining, and because of the cult status that it has now, people look at it differently. That's all I can say. to this day, there are still midnight showings of this film, and they're always completely sold out. There has been a real rejuvenation in the appreciation of this film. Now, is it Shakespeare in the Park? Is it Schindler's List? No, absolutely not. It never will be. But we do have to appreciate the film for what it is. Guys, let's be real. Anytime people develop drinking games around a film, it's gotta be pretty substantial in pop culture, and that's what this movie has. Yes, it is the most horrible film that you could ever watch from a continuity standpoint, writing, basically green screens, and poor dialogue, but it is a substantial film for many reasons. Also consider one thing. Bad director, good director, vampire, whatever other thing Tommy Wiseau has been associated with, he did have some very big Hollywood players make a film about him. And how many of you can say the same thing? I think it's pretty safe that we can put Tommy Wiseau in the category of other directors like Ed Wood, who are infamous for making horrible movies, but you have to admit that these films have their own charm in some way, and it doesn't mean that they haven't made a contribution to cinema. Now, it's not the kind of contribution that you want, but it is a contribution nonetheless. Now, The Room is a bad film, but it is an incredibly entertaining bad film. And The Disaster Artist is a great film, but one thing you also have to consider is that if it wasn't for that original horrible film, we wouldn't have this great film. So, in some strange way, we do have to thank Tommy Wiseau for this experience. And here's the thing, I highly recommend The Disaster Artist. It's a really great film, but it has to go hand with the original film, so I do recommend them both. Alright everybody, so that's my official review on the film The Disaster Artist. As always, I thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next AGR's Pop Culture Reviews.